we start this webinar, I would like to first welcome Mr. Jefri Sirait, the Chairman of Amvesindo, and Mr. Awaludin Marwan, PhD, the CEO of Heylaw, who have coordinated today's webinar event, How Venture Capital Can Boost Startup Investment Best Practices in Indonesia and the Netherlands. I would also like to welcome Mr. Felix Zwart and Mr. Ishara Yusdian as speakers into the webinar, and Professor Dr. Gusti Ketut Rachmi Handayani, SHMM, who will also participate in today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event mechanism will start with opening remarks, presentation, question and answer sessions before we finally end this webinar. Without further ado, I will now invite Professor Dr. Gusti Ketut Rachmi Handayani, Dean of UNS Faculty of Law, to give an opening speech for today's event.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Dr. Marwan, Awaludin Marwan, CEO Heylaw Indonesia, the Honorable Mr. Felix Zwart, the Netherlands Private Equity and Venture Capital Association Nvps, the Honorable Mr. Ishara Yusdian, co-founder and managing partner, Gayo Capital Indonesia Capital and Startup Association, or Amvesindo, the Honorable Mr. Jefri Sirait from Amvesindo, and the Honorable or Vice Dean, Faculty of Law, Universitas 11 Maret. I respect all of the attendees who attended here, especially to the organizers of the event. How does venture capital invest in startup? Best practice in Indonesia and the Netherlands. First of all, let us say praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, who gives thousands of favors to us all. On this day in pandemic COVID-19, we can implement event with festivities full a strong sense of community and set gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala as Lord of hosts, how we will keep a step along. This webinar is held in collaboration between Heylaw Indonesia, Faculty of Law Universitas 11 Maret, Amvesindo, Indonesia, Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, the initial purpose of funding by venture capital is to help early stage small companies grow and develop. In Indonesian jurisdiction, the government is eager to develop micro, small, and medium enterprises and also startup by providing incentives and facilities for investors, as well as by supporting the development of VC institution in Indonesia that can in turn provide funding for SMEs and startup also. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is seeing significant growth in the number of startups being established across various sectors. One trend seen in Indonesia is online apps, best startups. Many of these startups are looking for VC as a strategic option for financing their growth. And several startups in Indonesia have achieved unicorn status, including Gojek, Tokopedia, Traveloka, and Bukalapak. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank all speakers, Mr. Felix Zwart, and Mr. Ishara Yusdian, Mr. Jefri Sirait also, and Mas Lulu or Dr. Awaludin, as CEO Heylaw, and also committee. I think that's all, a few speech that I can convey about the importance of this webinar. I apologize if there is a wrong word in delivery process. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for your speech. Ladies and gentlemen, to make sure this webinar event runs smoothly, please make sure to mute your microphone while this webinar event is still ongoing. Okay, thank you. Now I'll invite Mr. Jefri Zwart, Chairman of Amvesindo, to deliver his speech. Mr. Jefri Zwart, the floor is all yours.
Ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua rekan-rekan. So I'm very delightful to be here today for the opening of this webinar. And let me take the opportunity to welcome you to Prof. Gusti Ayu as the Dean of University 11 Maret, Ibu. Also Felix Zwart as a Director of Netherlands Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, ya, Nvps. Bro Ishara as a member also at Amvesindo from Gayo Capital, and Bro Awaludin Marwan as a CEO at Heylaw, and also the all participant. The webinar provides a very unique opportunity for all of us because of its scope. Yeah, it has already attracted us, yeah, Amvesindo, and all the members all over the VC ecosystem, and all of us here, yeah, people came from the university also. I think this is, we know about the knowledge and all the issue of the innovation is very important for us. And we have already connected with the Dutch digital economy, especially the venture capitalist sector, when Felix Zwart as a director in NPV equity. Perhaps we can make a collaboration in this development as a partnership between the business matching also between Indonesian and Dutch investor, and all the digital startups is in Indonesia. Despite of the crisis here as a COVID-19, I think since we have already know from the Google Temasek economic of the Southeast Asia report in 2020, stipulate that Indonesia is still the fastest and the largest digital economic growth within the region in Indonesia. It's obtained more than 44 billion, yeah, 44 billion this year, and we'll get around 124 billion in 2025. So this is a big number from us. It came from the digital economic activities. So meanwhile, the Netherlands also is currently more than, I think more than 12 unicorn. Yeah, around 7,400 startups is very big number. I also read that most of the accelerator there is around 90, and also the not just only the accelerator, I think it's also the incubators. So comparing and connecting between Indonesia and the Netherlands will be good opportunity for us to boost the digital growth in both countries. So once more, as we are Amvesindo and also Heylaw as a host, and also University 11 Maret on this webinar, we look forward to meet and have a great discussion for this webinar. So all the investment issue, and we can listen for the all participation. And I think the discussion will be more attractive, and with the 9 universities in Indonesia join with this webinar. So hopefully, once again, Amvesindo, NVP, also Heylaw as a host, and University 11 Maret. Please, we can collaborate one another to boost the startup and digital economic in Indonesia. So again, welcome NVP, yeah, Felix Zwart, and welcome to Indonesia also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your speech, Mr. Sirait. Lastly, I would like to invite Mr. Awaludin Marwan, PhD as CEO of Heylaw, to give his opening remark. Mr. Awaludin, this time is all yours.
Thank you, Kelly. Dear Chief Jeff, I call him Chief Jeff, Jefri Sirait, Chairman of Amvesindo, our mentors, our teacher also. Professor Gusti Ayu, the Dean of 11 Maret University, thank you for coming and this collaboration. I would like to mention some senior here, Pak Edward Ismawan Handayani from Gayo Capital, Pak Edi Danusaputro, CEO Mandiri Capital, and the speakers, Felix Zwart, Goedemorgen there. It's a very sunny day in Netherlands. From Netherlands Private Equity and Venture Capital Associations, and Bang Ishara, the speakers, and all participants. Thank you for coming and join with our webinars. This webinar remind me the Korean drama entitled Startup. The role of Haji Pyong as a venture capitalist is very important. If we see Dosan, the main actors, and also Dalmin, the female actors, they didn't do nothing to develop their Samsung Tech or the startup. Before the VC venture capitalist Haji Pyong helped them to figure out the scale up. So the VC is very important. But unfortunately, as a startup, like a Heylaw and some of community in startup, I do find the difficulty to access the VC or the financings. Some research stipulate that the chance of startup to get a VC is 0.05%. It's so difficult to get investment from VC, despite VC is very, very important to boost a startup. That's why from the startup, we stand here to learn together how VC works and how to access the financing from VC. And some of you may have a question about why Netherlands? Because of not, I'm graduated from Netherlands, but also because of Netherlands is very important, as Chief Jeff mentioned. Netherlands only has 70 million populations, but they have 12 unicorns. So we have more people, but we only have 5 unicorns. And if Tokopedia and Gojek merge, and then we have only 4 unicorns. Despite we the highest number of unicorn in this region in the Southeast Asia, but it's compared to Netherlands, it's still very long way to go. So Indonesia and Netherlands, it's very important to be compared, not because of we have a long history. When I working in the parks, many old people give me greeting with the bahasa Merdeka, Soekarno, like this, because they have a long history with Indonesia. Some of them admire with our leader, for instance. And we have a similar legal system because I study at law. Culturally, we are very close. So many Indonesian restaurants open in Netherlands. I think Felix also like Indonesian food. Yes. I hope that we can invite Felix to Indonesia and can try the original taste of Indonesian food. That's why the culturally we are really close. That's why Heylaw conduct a program called Connecting Digital Startup Ecosystem in Indonesia and Netherlands. So Netherlands can be a gate to enter European market for Indonesian VC and startup. As I learned from discussion with Pak Edward when I talk with the Spanish entities, Indonesia can be a great gate also for Dutch VC and startup to enter the Southeast Asia market. So we can collaborate each other and help each other to scale up our impact. And in the near future, Heylaw conduct a program monthly webinar on health tech, fintech, agribusiness, water and waste management within next 5 months, and supported by the Dutch Embassy in Jakarta and also Indonesian Embassy in Hague. So hopefully we can connect Indonesian Dutch VC as well as Indonesia Dutch startup. Let's start our dream come true. We start with our missions, and let's start with these little events. So hopefully we can develop further. Again, thank you for all speakers and participants, and enjoy the discussions. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Marwan. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, in the current digital era, startup companies are developing faster than ever. The increase in the number of startup companies and the acceleration of their development happens all over the world, which of course includes Indonesia and Netherlands. This phenomena cannot be separated from the funding roles of investors, which includes investments given by venture capital companies. In this occasion, we will discuss how venture capital can boost startups, and we will explore its practice in Indonesia and the Netherlands. Now we will proceed to our next session, in which we will hear presentations from Mr. Felix Zwart, Director of the Netherlands Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, NVP, and Mr. Ishara Yusdian, co-founder and managing partner of Gayo Capital and member of Amvesindo. To Mr. Felix Zwart, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you also, Ishara Yusdian, for the invitation, and Professor Jefri Sirait, and Professor Dr. Gusti very much for all the nice introductions. Let me see if I can put up my presentation. That I have some things to share with you. This should work. No, not yet. Yeah. Now you've all seen it. Oh no. Okay, let's start from the start. Good afternoon to you all. Good morning from a very sunny Amsterdam. My name is Felix Zwart. I am a Director of Research and Policy at NVP, the Dutch Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. Next to that, I'm also a PhD student at Rotterdam School of Management. I am writing a PhD on the history of government intervention in venture capital market. So that's also something I will give a few insights on in this presentation here. It is really a great pleasure to be speaking with you today, and I hope to share with you some best practices and some history of how venture capital came about in the Netherlands. First, something about NVP. We were founded in 1984. Our chairperson at the moment is Annemarie Jorritsma. She's a politician and was also a deputy prime minister in the 1990s, from 1994 until 2002. We are a relatively small organization. We have 9 people working with us, but we have 101 full members, of which 40% are VCs. The other 60% are private equity investors, fund of funds, and also some regional government funds. Next to our 101 full members, we also have associated members, advisors, legal advisors, corporate finance advisors, everybody who is somewhat connected to the investment process. We represent about 90% of the available capital available in the Netherlands for private equity and venture capital. What we do are 4 things. First, we are a lobbying organization. So we lobby the government, the Dutch government in The Hague, for better regulation and a better view of private equity. We also do that in Brussels, where the European Union sits. So we have a lot of European regulation coming at us, and it is very good to have our voice heard there as well. We do that together with other associations across Europe. Invest Europe is the association for the whole of Europe, and we work very closely together with them. What we do also, secondly, is we do research. How much capital was invested in how many companies, for instance, but also how many companies were sold or how many new funds were raised from institutional investors. That is primarily my job also at NVP. So this presentation will be also full of numbers on the Dutch market. Third, we provide training and professional standards. So we have a training program for junior investment managers. We have advanced courses for more developed media roles, but we also have very specialized sessions for back office people, but also for the most senior people. And we have a code of conduct with best practices and standard documentation that I will show you later, which especially from a legal perspective can be very useful to have. And next to that, we are like the place to go to if anybody wants information about private equity, venture capital, or venture capital in the Netherlands. Think of the press, investors, and also academics. Some facts to start with, I think. It was already mentioned by Awaludin that the Netherlands has only 17 million inhabitants, which all packed together in a very small area. So we know each other well. We are close together with everybody. Dutch venture capitals have venture capitalists have a total of 7.9 billion of funds, capital under management. That is not the value of their portfolios, but that is what they have available to invest. Plus about 2 billion for growth capital firms, which is a bit more mature, but which is from the Series E and up investment firms. It's very often related to venture capital. In the past, we saw around 400 million euros of VC investments in Dutch companies per year, but especially the last couple of years, we've seen this go up very rapidly. And according to our research, about 1,100 Dutch companies have a VC from the Netherlands or from another country as a shareholder. And let's see how, well, to get sort of a grasp of how the venture capital landscape looks like, I've here the numbers of how much was invested in the whole of Europe in venture capital and growth capital. We see a really growing trend here since 2007. It was always difficult to find capital for early stage funding, but on the whole of Europe, you really see this trend going up. Of course, the later growth capital rounds are larger, but we see in every segment, even the seed capital segment, the very earliest investments, we clearly see a rising trend. For instance, the amount that has been invested in just the early stage has gone up from 5 billion a year to 10 billion and in a few years. When we look at in how many companies was this invested, we see a similar trend of a growing market. For instance, here we see 3,000 startups last year got an investment from a venture capitalist, and about 2,000 from had a more mature financing phase investment from a growth capital fund. And I think also the seed capital funding has gone up quite spectacular if you look at all these really small investments from 584 up until 1,175 last year. So, and how does the Netherlands compare in these European numbers? As said before, the Netherlands only has 17 million inhabitants. And what I plotted here, the blue columns are the European numbers that I showed on previously. But in the lines, I plotted a few European other countries. And you can see that even though all these other countries are a lot larger than the Netherlands, in absolute numbers, they're pretty close to what we do. Especially Germany. In Germany, that has a population that is 84, 82 million people. The investment numbers are quite similar to what is happening in the Netherlands. The UK clearly has an even larger market for VC. But for a very small country with relatively few inhabitants, you can see that the Netherlands really is a very well-developed market for venture capital. Let's see. And when we zoom in on the Dutch market in particular, you can see this growing trend that we witnessed on European level even more clearly. It was always very difficult to get funding for early stage companies, where previously, especially after the big financial crisis, levels were really plummeting. We've really seen this uptake in the last few years, and also the seed funding has been very favorable for the last couple of years. And when you compare this with the number of companies that were invested in, you can clearly see that we have a few larger companies that are attracting a lot of money in the growth capital stage. And on the whole, this market is really improving. And these are investments in Dutch companies by both Dutch VCs, but also foreign VCs, non-Dutch VCs. And when we look at in which sectors are especially popular, we can see that the biotech and healthcare sector is really a backbone of focal point of investments in the Netherlands when it comes to VC. That's some historical reasons. We had some unicorns in the 90s in biotech, and also some very good research universities. And this whole ecosystem has developed because of that quite nicely. And also government policy has been very successful in stimulating this ecosystem. However, ICT is also an enormously important sector that can be all kinds of IT-related investments. On the next slide, I will give some examples and also a link to a place where you can find all these companies. And also fintech is a sector that attracts a lot of capital. We have a few recent unicorns from the fintech sector that are well, very successful up until now. Here's some, let me see. Oh yeah, this is the number of companies. Here you also see this pattern quite well. You see a little bit more that the smaller rounds are going to other sectors. So you really see that also the larger rounds are going into the life sciences, biotech sectors and the IT sectors. But there's also a lot of smaller rounds going on in other sectors, like consumer goods and energy and transportation also. Building and construct agriculture is also an important sector. But it's not always very clear if something, because in the modern age, anything can be IT, but it can be agriculture related. So there's always a mixed match between these two. If you're interested in seeing how the Dutch ecosystem looks like, I have a great link for you here. You can, with a free account, you can just go through all these startups, investors that are active in the Netherlands. I picked out a few unicorns. I think there are more, but or a bit, it's about this size. But it's a very nice tool to have a look at. So there's some fintech companies here. There are a lot of biotech companies, but also consumer retail. Everybody will get the presentation afterwards, so you can find the link very easily through this presentation. To summarize, if you might have seen these numbers, you think, well, startup funding in the Netherlands is successful, but also what I'm focusing on with my research at the University of Rotterdam, it really took a very long time to get there. It is difficult to establish a market for early stage funding because the risk is too high. Normal investors normally are shying away from such a risky investment. So this market does not happen. But having innovative high growth companies really is good for an economy. It increases competitiveness, innovation, new jobs, and improves well-being in general. Therefore, it is logical for a government to step in for certain projects to help establish this market. And in the United States, many people think the United States is sort of this free market Valhalla, but in a way it is, of course, but it's also very dependent on government policy. Already in the 1950s, they instituted a government policy that's still around today to stimulate investments in small businesses, and that evolved into venture capital. And in the Netherlands, since the 1970s, we have various programs either aimed at investing in venture capital funds or investing in startup companies directly. And I have a little overview here. We have regional development funds. So even although our country is pretty small, we have 12 provinces that almost all of them have a separate regional development fund to stimulate investments in that particular region. They also do some fund-of-fund investments in other VC funds. We have on a European level, the European Investment Fund that does investments in VC funds that are a little bit more later stage, and it's often in cooperation with the Dutch government. A very important scheme that we have had since 2005 is the seed capital scheme for the very early stage VCs. The Dutch government acts as a LP investor in that fund up until 6 million euros. And that really allows these fund managers to de-risk a little bit of their portfolio and attract private money also, because this is the riskiest part of VC investing, really the seed part. Next to that, we have a fairly recent institution. This is InvestNL. That is the National Promotional Bank, and that is doing a combination of investments in VC funds and direct investments in startup companies. It's not because they only got about 1 year ago. It's not really clear yet how they will see their role, but they will probably also do a lot of cross-border investments. So it might be good that they maybe they want to, that they are interested in also getting better ties with Indonesia. Maybe something for our next session. And where does this government influence really manifest itself most visibly? That is in the fundraising of new VC funds from investors. To the left here, I have in orange, of course, included the government funding in VC funds. And you see that this, as a percentage of total fundraising from also private institutional investors, this is fairly even, fairly percentage, but the pie as a whole has grown considerably. So that really shows that government investment in funds can really grow the whole market as a whole without it being crowded out by the government. And so I think this is a very good example of successful government policy. Going to the next slide. What are some best practices from NVP to boost the VC ecosystem? First of all, I think I've shown you that the government is really important into stimulating, especially the most high risks parts of VC funding. So always be the first point of contact for any government initiatives. For instance, this 2005 seed capital scheme really was designed with NVP and our members together. The VC market before 2005 was a complete disaster in the Netherlands. We had just seen the internet bubble burst, and really the sector was not very healthy anymore. But together with the government, we really managed to rebuild this part of the industry. I've also talked about providing training. We have an extensive basic training program for junior staff, but also a very detailed webinars on tech due diligence, board assessments, SaaS investments, you name it, but also back office webinars. It is, for instance, becoming more and more important to have anti-money laundering procedures in your organization. Well, and how do you manage that as a small VC? We try to give some easy points to help with that. A more sort of recent development is that we've started to develop more standard documentation. For instance, we have non-disclosure agreements that are industry-wide agreed and that are for free on our website. You can also change them if you want to, or add a paragraph or whatever. The links in here lead to our website where you can download those documentations. I think they can be very helpful to you too. They're in English, so it's useful. There's also another website, capitalwaters.nl, where you can find open source legal documentation on all kinds of things, cap tables, investor LPA agreements, anything that has a legal agreement between you and your startup or between your investor. And that's open source. You can also change it if you want to. And what I think is also important, what we do is we are an association by our members, for our members. So we provide these trainings and standard documentations really from our own community. And we have advisors helping us with that. I have a last slide on our code of conduct. We have had a code of conduct since 1986, at least the Dutch version. And this code of conduct is bundled with 100+ pages of best practices on how to run your VC fund and how to interact with the founders, entrepreneurs that you meet, but also with the investors in your fund. And all these best practices are derived from these 6 basic points that a good investor is obliged to hold. If you are a member of an organization, let's act with integrity, keep your promises, disclose conflicts of interest, act in fairness, maintain confidentiality, and do no harm to the industry. Pretty obvious things you might think, but still always important to keep in the back of your mind if you want to be a durable and sustainable investment sector. All right, I think I've gone over the time a little bit, so apologies for that. I think there's some time for some questions if you would like.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zwart. But I think the questions and answer sessions will be after all the presentations are done.
All right. Then I'll stop sharing.
Okay, thank you. You can stop there. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zwart.
Thank you.
To conclude a bit, as what Mr. Zwart said, there are a growth trend in European venture and capital investment market, and it could be seen that even in Netherlands, with relatively small amount of people, with only 17 million inhabitants, it is still a very fine market for the venture capital. But we can see that just like in Indonesia, I guess, it's a bit hard for the early stage company to get funding since it is a bit risky for the investors, and therefore government's intervention is there to help. But also the MVP has program to boost the VC ecosystem in Netherlands, like working together with the government, providing training and making standard documents. It is done by the VC and for VC. So amazing, Mr. Zwart. So thank you for the amazing presentation. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Ishara Yusdian to deliver his presentation. So Mr. Yusdian.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. I think before I start, I would like to ask for permission, to make a session more fruitful. Can I speak bilingual in English and Bahasa?
Sure.
All right. Pak Awal, selamat pagi.
What happened with the presentation?
Terima kasih atas opportunity yang telah diberikan. So, good afternoon, everybody. So I think I would like to know whether everyone here is still wake up. So can I listen to like good morning from all the attendants, Kelly? Can you say let's to them like good morning? So I can say that everybody is here. Hello, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
No, I'm sorry. I can hear any voices. So can you just repeat one more time? Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
That's interesting. Thank you so much, for your presentation. So it's important as well to know that, you're still in the room. So first of all, I would like to thank Awal and the team, for the utmost job to bring in all the speakers from all over the world. Felix, thank you so much for your time as well this afternoon. Pak Jefri, Bu Ayu, terima kasih atas waktunya di sela-sela kesibukan. I also would like to mention my colleague in Amvesindo. There is Pak Edward here and also my associate, Heylaw. Morning, guys.
Morning, Pak Ishara.
Morning.
Okay, sure. Without further ado, please allow me to start to deliver my presentation in bilingual. So Felix, allow me to speak in Bahasa and English so that everybody here probably, would like to getting know more about what's happening in Indonesia. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, wow. So to share with you, the slide before, sorry. So in Indonesia, we have an association, where there's a place for a venture capital and also a startup together with the government and the community to come together. So jadi teman-teman di sini kira-kira udah pernah dengar atau belum tentang Amvesindo, nanti kita bisa explore lebih jauh ya buat teman-teman startup. And Gayo Capital itself is one of Amvesindo member. So we are member of Amvesindo since last year. So a little bit about Gayo Capital. So Gayo Capital is one of the VC that investing in the impact area. So our investment spawns from the agriculture, and then we also have the waste management portfolio. We also have education. Last but not the least, that we also investing in few of the lifestyle portfolio. So I would like also to share with you guys on what happening in Indonesia, despite the pandemic last year and also currently going on within this year. Di next slide-nya kita bisa ngelihat ya teman-teman ya. Well, sorry, I think we need to move to next slide. Halo. Okay, so in 2020, based on the data that we get in Amvesindo, there is a total of 1.9 billion capital that has been raised by 52 of the Indonesian startup, right? So at the same time, the valuation growth of these VCs, or we call it as a VC asset, is rose by 15.9% year on year. So it's around like 1.3 billion. So in Southeast Asia itself, right? So the total number that we've been booked is around 2.7 billion. So if you can see here, Indonesia has the largest number that we have been able to. It's like what Pak Jefri mentioned, in the first session that there is an ongoing of the huge spike that is coming from all the VCs and also from the startup despite of the pandemic that has been happening since last year. Nah, jadi kalau teman-teman lihat, meskipun tahun lalu memang ada pandemik, tapi kita lihat not only those that categorized as unicorn, tapi juga ada beberapa yang memang berhasil juga untuk bisa book secara funding ya. Baik itu dari VC lokal maupun itu dari VC luar. Nah, ini yang menjadi fakta menarik buat teman-teman pelajari juga. Dan kalau dilihat dari sisi percentage, it's 1.9 billion out of 2.7 billion US dollar that we were able to book in Indonesia. So it's quite large number that has been booked in Indonesia itself standalone, right? Nah, sedangkan untuk di 2021, in 2021, at least the last Q1, we recorded that, half of billion US dollar that, we were able to book. And one of them probably you guys know is coming from, the merge of the GoTo, which is Gojek and Tokopedia as well. And unlike last year, tahun ini, VC and investor is ready, to put, all the money and also something that related with investment. Dan kita nggak cuma ngelihat dari sisi beberapa sektor aja, tapi memang dari semua landscape yang memang kita bisa lihat seperti itu. Nah, ini adalah gambaran, di sebelah kiri ada chart, ya, ada chart yang memang udah kita summarize. So if you take a look on the chart, most of them, yes, those are the startups that is already on the Series B and above, but nggak nutup kemungkinan juga buat teman-teman yang memang masih currently bootstrap atau currently in the seeding stage and all that. So it's really depends on the next, slide that I will explain to you. Sebenarnya apa sih yang menjadi challenges untuk para VC atau para investor untuk bisa invest gitu loh di startup di Indonesia. So on how, you guys in startup also might see this as an opportunity for you to improve. Especially those that still on the bootstrapping atau yang masih dalam seeding stage. Ya, kita bisa lihat di next slide ya. So, dari sisi VC, definitely kita ngelihat selain karakteristik dari founder dan tim, kita juga ngelihat dari sisi business model. So, most of the time, kalau kita lagi dengerin pitching dari teman-teman, kita tuh nggak pernah tahu gitu loh, on how you guys able to scale the business. So, that's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing, mostly during the pitching time, especially yang memang currently masih on the bootstrap, period ya. Kemudian dari sisi bisnis sendiri juga kita melihat ada challenge dari sisi capital gains tax dari capital gain yang didapat untuk VC itu masih cukup lumayan besar kalau di Indonesia. So Felix, this is one of the biggest challenge that all the VCs in Indonesia currently facing, right? So on every capital gains, the tax that has been borne to that is still quite big, which is for the VC itself is around 25%, while for the individual is around 30%. Nah, teman-teman di Amvesindo di lead sama Pak Jefri, so lead by Pak Jefri Sirait, we are still working on how we would like to overcome these challenges so that more VCs would like to put the money and also going forward with this investments, right? Nah, pertanyaan berikutnya adalah kalau gitu teman-teman di VC itu naruh uangnya di mana? Kenapa nggak di Indonesia? Kenapa di luar? Seperti itu. Nah, ini yang memang menjadi challenge sekarang dia, teman-teman ya, seperti itu. Nah, and then how we act. Nah, jadi di Amvesindo kita work hand in hand dengan beberapa teman-teman VC yang lain. Not only pada saat kita melakukan portfolio screening until deal sourcing sampai bisa kita closing, tapi we also, implement few of the strategy that can help this portfolio, going forward. So one of the strategy that kita di VC, di Amvesindo implement itu adalah Pentahelix system. The next slide. So if you guys take a look on this chart, it's not only a capital and also a business that we see from the ecosystem, but there is also a community and participation from the government and the knowledge itself. So these are one of the approach that, most of the VCs in Indonesia, is implement. Probably it's a little bit slightly different with the one that Felix just, explained. But these are, one of the example that we implement here. Nah, Amvesindo itu adanya di mana? Nah, Amvesindo itu adanya di komunitas. So one of the role that Amvesindo has is enabler on how the capital from the investor, the businesses that coming from the startups, can also be aligned with the program from the government that is supported by the set of the knowledge that also we have, right? So the next slide would explain about how the VC invest in the startup. This is the general best practices which, semua VC juga lakukan ya. Jadi teman-teman di startup definitely yang udah pernah pitching dan lain-lain, we will do the, a searching on the portfolio, the targeted portfolio that we are interested the most. So kalau di Gayo Capital, karena kita memang fokusnya adalah di impact investment, definitely kita akan lihat di impact sector yang memang related dengan kita punya thesis. Definitely, after that, there will be a screening and then due diligence dari sisi business, founders, dan lain-lain, up until kita make a decision towards the term sheet until we invested on the money. Nah, yang nomor 6 ini yang menjadi perbedaan kita. And this is one of the strength that, Amvesindo playing a pivotal role. So we are not only giving a capital, we are not only, mentoring the founders, we are not only incubating the business and all that, but we also aligning those businesses in the portfolio that we invested dengan beberapa program yang memang sifatnya strategik. Seperti misalkan beberapa program pemerintah, kaitannya dengan example like waste management, ocean cleanup, and all that. So these are the 6 processes in Indonesia that, we have performed, in order for us to invest in the startup. And what makes us different is basically that, we also deliver the portfolio optimization. Yes, and this is my last slide, guys, by the way. So if you have any question, and before that, I will offer back to Kelly. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yusdian. So we know that in 2020 and 2021, billions of dollars has successfully been absorbed by Indonesia. And during the pitching period, VC usually face a lot of challenges, like difficulty of startup in scaling their business, tax competitiveness compared to other country, and etc. And in this, Amvesindo tried to help by aligning the startup investor to the government, and also by delivering portfolio optimization. Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you for all our speakers delivering amazing presentations. Now we'll proceed to the Q&A session. For all of you who have any questions, please don't hesitate to drop your questions in the chat box. Okay. You guys who have questions, please don't hesitate. Okay, while waiting for the questions, maybe I want to ask something about before, like Mr. Zwart has also mentioned, like many investors are a bit doubt to have their doubt while investing to an early stage startup. So because the risk is so big, right? We didn't really know how it will go. So usually how do VCs how do VCs assess these startup before they finally decide to invest in it?
Well, yeah, it is a very almost subjective assessment, of course, because it is not like in a more mature company, you can look at how the numbers are going. Yeah? There's a very often negative cash flow there. So what VCs really build upon is their own knowledge of the sector and their experience of technology. Especially in life sciences investors, you see that people have very experienced background in medicine, are often very a doctor themselves. But in tech investments, you also see that people have a background in programming or other things. And it is also important that the government takes away a little bit of that risk in your fund so that you're able to be a bit more risky. And I think that's also plays a big hand. And of course, syndication. So you split up the investment with other investors so that you de-risk your investment a little bit. I think those are
I think, Kelly, I wanted to add up on the Felix, comment there, right? I think as a startup, right, one of the things that we can do as our homework before we deliver our pitch deck or before we set up any meeting with, any VC associate, I think the homework that this startup might, done first is actually to do a reset. It's like a simple research that what is the investment appetite or the investment basis that every single VC has, right? For example, right, there is a startup A that, has the model for the IoT on drone, and they would like to pitch to Gayo. While in Gayo, we don't have any interest at all in the high tech, right? So that's the things that, most of the challenges that probably all the startups that is still on the bootstrap, on the setting stage is, facing, right? So if you guys are able to do the homework, at least to see on which investment basis that probably meet and fit with your business plan, I think that will be better.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm also I also want to know, like VC, we usually know that VC try to invest in a company, right? But where does got their funds from? It's a bit, maybe some of the audiences also want to know where usually the VC got their funds from.
Okay, Felix first or me first?
Very often that is like former entrepreneurs, wealthy families, also a few government initiative fund of funds becoming more and more important. Less so pension funds, but we're working on that to maybe increase that too. But I would say high net people who have previously and rich families are very important.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think the same thing as well in Indonesia. Although most of the fund are coming from the corporate VC or corporate private equity, but few of them also comes from the conglomerates and also comes from the personal investors.
Oh, very interesting. Oh, so we have a question from Rahadian Susilo. He asked, how much is the influence of venture capital growth on commercial banks, especially in the Netherlands? And how NVP's reaction to the existence of cryptocurrencies?
That's an interesting question. We see crypto, it is a traditional sector, venture capital. So it is very traditionally investing capital and growing the business and using equity. But there are, so in the broad scene, I don't really see that much influence on crypto, but there are a few specialized crypto investors. So that is true, yeah. And commercial banking, I would say those things exist next to each other. We don't really see banks doing equity investments, especially not in early stage companies. Maybe a little bit of corporate venture capital. But I would say that exists happily next to each other.
Okay, interesting. Maybe I would like to ask Mr. Yusdian. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm still here, Kelly.
Okay. Regarding maybe, how about Indonesia? Does Indonesia's VCs have any reaction to the existence of cryptocurrencies that has been quite popular in Indonesia this past months?
Yeah, I think few startups and also few family offices has been embarking on this cryptocurrency initiative. But again, the regulation is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now. So the way I see it is just like how Gojek was started, right? So back then in 2010, there wasn't any belief from the financial sector on how Gojek would like to tap those unbanked to have a financial inclusion, right? Be it coming from the regulation perspective, be it coming from the market adoption, be it coming from the experience from the user as well. But again, 5 years later, and then everything is come to the as our daily consumptions, right? So you can ask all the attendance shares that who is on the audience that is not using any of the Gojek services, like a GoFood probably, like a GoCar, right? And then a GoMart and all that, right? So something like the cryptocurrency first, right? So most of these startup, that is mostly tapping into these family offices or the conglomerates, they try to start it first, and then while waiting for the regulation to be settled, sometimes probably, I don't know, around the 3 or 5 years, where all the financial inclusion is there. I think it's going to be a big gig as well. So that's my opinion so far.
Yeah, actually cryptocurrencies has been quite interesting these few months, especially the trend, Mr. Zwart, in Indonesia. It has been really crazy these few months.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also, maybe because of the time, we have the last questions from Mr. Edward Ismawan. He asked, we know that the Netherlands agriculture is leading globally. How Indonesian VCs and agri startups are able to tap into prominent players in the Netherlands? And are they interested to collaborate for Indonesian's market?
Well, I would say definitely. There is also a very prominent agricultural bank, Rabobank, that has an extensive VC program, also in VC funds, but also direct investments. So, and there is a national promotional bank, FMO, who is working on agriculture. But of course, you can also almost email me at NVP for any questions. And the link I showed in my presentation to this deal room database that you can access for free. There you can find all the agriculture investors and agriculture startups. So it's, I think the answer is yes. Good question.
Probably, Kelly, I have just one question to Felix, to add up what Edward just, asked, right? So from the business perspective, right, Felix, which sectors that, Netherlands VC mostly invested in agriculture? Is it on the upstream or is it on the downstream?
I don't know. I have to look into that, the upstream or the downstream. It's very much in high tech developments, and I think it's a very broad way. I think you can see anything. Yeah. Let's get to that after the meeting.
All right, sure, got it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you a lot, Mr. Yusdian, Mr. Zwart, for answering all of our questions. We do learn a lot and gain a lot of insight from today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar has come to an end. I believe we all have received a lot of interesting insights and useful knowledge from our speakers. I would like to say thank you for all of our speakers and also participants for joining today's webinar. And lastly, also every parties that have made today's event possible. Thank you for everyone. This is the end of today's webinar. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Kelly, Felix.
Thank you, Felix.
so much.
Ishara, Prof Ayu, and all of you.
Chief Chair, terima kasih Pak Edward, buat Prof Ayu. Ya.
Thank you all. I leave now.
Stay healthy,
Okay,
everyone.